October 10, 2025. A ceasefire takes effect in Gaza. Trump calls it a strong and durable peace. The UN Security Council endorses it. International forces prepare to deploy. Hamas agrees to disarm. Israel begins withdrawal. The world celebrates. But hidden in this peace agreement are 7 specific markers that Daniel warned about 2,500 years ago. 7 keys that unlock the true purpose behind these events. 7 signs that this isn't just about Gaza. It's about the final countdown to the most significant period in human history. And once you see these 7 keys, you'll never look at Middle East peace deals the same way again. On September 29, 2025, Trump announced his 20-point plan for Gaza alongside Netanyahu at the White House. Hamas accepted the agreement on October 9th, and the ceasefire began October 10th. Then, on October 13th, Trump traveled to Egypt for an international summit where he, Egyptian President El-Sisi, Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim, and Turkish President Erdogan signed the Trump Declaration for Enduring Peace and Prosperity. 4 leaders, multiple nations, 1 agreement, and the language they used was chilling. The declaration states, "We pursue a comprehensive vision of peace, security, and shared prosperity in the region." Peace and security. Those exact words. But Daniel saw this coming, and he left us 7 keys to understand what's really happening. Before we decode what's happening right now, you need to understand Daniel's framework. These aren't random predictions. They're 7 specific keys that unlock end-time events. And right now, every single one is turning. Daniel 9:24-27 describes 70 sevens, or 70 weeks of years, which equals 490 years total. The timeline is divided into 3 periods: 7 weeks, which is 49 years, 62 weeks, which is 434 years, and 1 final week, 7 years. The first 69 weeks ran from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 445 BC until the Messiah appeared. But there's 1 week left, the 70th week, 7 final years. And that week requires a specific trigger. Daniel 9:27 says, "He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, which is 7 years." Notice the word many, not 1 nation, not 2. Many nations working together under a single agreement. The Abraham Accords brought Israel together with the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. Kazakhstan joined in November 2025. But Trump's Gaza peace plan went further. The plan calls for demilitarization of Gaza, deployment of an international stabilization force, transitional governance by Palestinian technocrats under international supervision, and a conditional pathway toward Palestinian statehood. And who signed it? France, Germany, Russia, Italy, Spain, UAE, Egypt, Turkey, Qatar, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Canada, and the United Kingdom all expressed support. A covenant, with many, under international supervision. This is key number 2 unlocking right now. But here's where it gets chilling. On November 17, 2025, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 2803, authorizing the Board of Peace as a transitional administration in Gaza and establishing the International Stabilization Force. The resolution states that the Board of Peace and International Security presence shall remain authorized until December 31, 2027. December 31, 2027. Exactly 7 years from when this framework began forming. Daniel predicted international control, a governing body overseeing peace. Multiple nations participating under unified command. And it's not theoretical. It's happening right now in Gaza. Key number 4. Technology enabling global control. Daniel chapter 12, verse 4, predicted that in the end times, knowledge would increase. But here's what makes 2025 different. As of July 2025, 137 countries and currency unions, representing 98% of global GDP, are exploring central bank digital currencies. Currently, 72 countries are in the advanced phase of exploration, development, pilot, or launch, with 49 CBDC pilot projects around the world. China's digital yuan reached 7 trillion ECNY. That's $986 billion in total transaction volume by June 2024, nearly 4 times the 1.8 trillion yuan recorded in June 2023. India's digital rupee in circulation rose to 10.16 billion rupees, that's $122 million, by March 2025, up 334% from the previous year. This isn't just about convenience. Digital currency gives governments broad new powers when it comes to surveillance and controlling its population, with direct visibility of financial transactions. Critics warn it could see citizens fined in a split second for behaviors deemed undesirable, and could prohibit purchases of products. Revelation 13 describes a system where no one can buy or sell without a mark. For 2,000 years, that seemed impossible. But right now, 137 countries are building the exact infrastructure that makes it possible. But here's the piece that connects everything. Daniel's 70th week requires sacrifices, and sacrifices require a temple. In April 2024, Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir implemented a policy allowing Jewish prayers inside Al-Aqsa Mosque without interruption, changing the decades-old status quo. In June, Temple Mount activists said Ben-Gvir told them, from now on, his policy is to allow singing and dancing throughout the Temple Mount. Since October 7, 2023, Israeli authorities have intensified efforts at the Temple Mount site, with increased settler raids and restrictions on Muslim access. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir visited the Temple Mount on August 3, 2025, and Jewish groups are now praying openly every day. A scale model of the Third Temple already exists and can be viewed at a visitors center in Jerusalem. The Temple Institute has recreated all the furniture according to biblical specifications. The instruments exist, the plans are complete, and the political framework to make it possible is being negotiated right now through Trump's peace deal. Thessalonians 5:3 warns, when people are saying, everything is peaceful and secure, then disaster will fall on them as suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pains begin, and there will be no escape. Notice those specific words again: peace and security. The same exact language used in Trump's October 2025 declaration in Egypt. According to prophetic interpretation, when the world sees this peace deal signed, they will say, peace and safety. The enemies who have signed will say, peace. The world who believe that Muslims are now pacified will say, safety. But Paul explains, this will occur after the rapture, and the day of the Lord will catch unbelievers by surprise. They will think the world is experiencing peace and security, but sudden destruction will come upon them. Think about what's happening right now. Hamas disarmed, international peacekeepers deployed, a board of peace overseeing Gaza reconstruction, multiple nations celebrating diplomatic breakthrough, the exact scenario Paul warned about. But here's the final key. Daniel 9:26-27 mentions the people of the prince who is to come, who will destroy the city and sanctuary, and this prince will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. According to dispensationalist interpretation, the prince to come is the Antichrist, who will make a 7-year covenant with the many, involving more than just Jews, but also their enemies. Many prophecy scholars note it's interesting to watch leader after leader try to broker a peace deal in the Middle East, because when a man finally manages to do it comprehensively, biblical prophecy indicates he could be the Antichrist. Now, we need to be clear here. This doesn't mean Trump is the Antichrist. Biblical scholars have debated for centuries about the identity and timing of this figure. What we're observing is how current diplomatic frameworks align with prophetic descriptions. The covenant is forming. The international oversight exists. The peace language matches. The timeline points to 7 years. And somewhere in this framework, a leader will emerge who can take it even further. The question isn't if this prophecy will be fulfilled. The question is whether we're watching the foundation being laid right now. Now watch what's happening on another front. While peace deals form in one direction, ancient enemies are aligning in another. Ezekiel 38 describes a coalition led by Gog of the land of Magog from the far north which many prophecy scholars identify as Russia, along with Persia, that's Iran, Meshech, and Tubal, that's Turkey, and other nations. For centuries, this seemed like an impossible alliance. Russia, Iran, and Turkey had competing interests and conflicting ideologies, but something changed. The alliance of Turkey, Russia, and Iran formally emerged in 2017 with the Astana Summit, where Russia initiated more structured cooperation despite backing opposing armed groups in the Syrian conflict. Since late 2024, Turkey has deepened its military and security ties with Syria's new leadership after Assad's fall. Here's what makes this prophetically significant. With Assad's fall in December 2024, Syria has become the testing ground of a strategic experiment in regional power realignment. For Turkey, Syria is now the center of its regional ambitions, providing a direct path to establish military bases across Syria. And where is Syria located? Directly north of Israel. Russia now has a military presence situated directly north of Israel for the first time, which is prophetically significant since Ezekiel said the invading force will come from north of Israel. However, we must note something critical here. After Syria's regime change, Iran and Russia both lost a key ally, significantly weakening their power in the region. In December 2024, Iran's foreign minister had a heated argument with Turkey's foreign minister, with Iran claiming Turkey allowed the Syrian opposition offensive. This alliance is fragile. With the lack of any strong ideological bonds beyond an anti-US strategy, relations between Iran and Russia could fray. But here's what prophecy students are watching. Despite current tensions, these three nations, Russia, Iran, and Turkey, have formed an unprecedented military cooperation framework positioned directly north of Israel. The exact configuration Ezekiel described 2,500 years ago. The question isn't whether these nations will eventually align against Israel. According to Ezekiel, they will. The question is when, and what will trigger the final move. But here's where everything converges into Daniel's most terrifying prediction. In Matthew 24:15-16, Jesus says, "So, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, then those in Judea must flee to the mountains." Daniel's prophecy about the abomination of desolation seemed to have at least a partial fulfillment in 167 BC, when Greek ruler Antiochus IV desecrated the temple in Jerusalem by setting up an altar to Zeus and sacrificing a pig on the altar. But Jesus, speaking some 200 years after Antiochus's evil actions, spoke of Daniel's prophecy as having a still future fulfillment. According to the futurist interpretation many prophecy scholars hold, the Antichrist in the end times will establish a covenant with Israel for 7 years, and then break it by doing something similar to what Antiochus did in the temple. Daniel 12:11 states that the daily sacrifices will be taken away when this abomination is set up, meaning that daily sacrifices will be re-established at some point in the future. Think about what this requires. For sacrifices to stop, they must be happening. For them to happen, a temple must exist. For a temple to exist, an impossible peace agreement must make it politically possible. We now have key number 1, Daniel's 70-week timeline pointing to 7 years. Key number 2, a covenant with many nations under Trump's peace framework. Key number 3, international oversight through the Board of Peace and UN Security Council. Key number 4, technology enabling global control through digital currencies. Key number 5, increasing Jewish access to the Temple Mount. Key number 6, the peace and security language triggering sudden destruction. Key number 7, the prince who confirms the covenant. But there's one more piece, the abomination itself. The moment when worship shifts from God to man, when the temple becomes a throne, when the helper becomes the betrayer. And according to Jesus, when you see it happen, there's only one response: run. Now watch how every piece locks into place at the same moment. The UN Security Council resolution authorizes the Board of Peace and International Stabilization Force to remain in place until December 31st, 2027. That's the end date, written into international law, a specific timeline. Count backwards. The Abraham Accords were signed September 15th, 2020. The Gaza peace plan was announced September 29th, 2025. The Board of Peace mandate runs until December 34th, 2027. 7 years, a covenant with many, international oversight, technology enabling control, temple preparations accelerating, false peace before destruction, and a leader brokering agreements that seemed impossible. Every single key Daniel predicted is turning right now. Trump plans to announce before Christmas the move to Phase 2, unveiling the new governance structure for Gaza. The Board of Peace will be led by Trump and include roughly a dozen other world leaders, with Trump declaring he believes Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman will be among them. Trump, MBS, multiple nations, overseeing peace until December 31st, 2027. Phase 2 envisions disarming Hamas, further Israeli withdrawals, gradual transfer of security to the International Stabilization Force, and establishment of an interim technocratic government overseen by the Board of Peace. Ultimately, the board would transfer governance to a reformed Palestinian Authority, opening a pathway towards Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Countries including Indonesia, Azerbaijan, Egypt, and Turkey are willing to contribute troops to the ISF. Muslim nations, working with Israel, under international command, enforcing peace. This isn't theory. This isn't interpretation. This is happening right now with specific dates, specific nations, specific mechanisms, matching Daniel's prophecy with precision. But here's what nobody's talking about. Daniel didn't predict this peace would last. He predicted it would be broken. At the midpoint, 3.5 years in, which means if this framework began forming in 2020 and the formal structures remain authorized until December 34th, 2027, we're not watching the beginning anymore, we're watching the middle approach. And according to Daniel, the midpoint is when everything changes, when the helper becomes the betrayer, when peace becomes tribulation, when the temple becomes a throne. The question isn't if this will happen. The question is, how close are we to the moment when someone walks into that rebuilt temple and demands worship? In Matthew 24:15-30, Jesus defines the Great Tribulation as beginning with the revealing of the abomination of desolation and ending with Christ's second coming. According to dispensationalist interpretation, the Great Tribulation is the last half of the tribulation period, 3.5 years in length, distinguished because the beast will be revealed, and the wrath of God will greatly intensify during this time. Matthew 24:21 says, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be." Revelation 6-19 indicates that the Great Tribulation will mark the death of hundreds of millions of people in a comparatively short period of time. This isn't meant to frighten you into panic. It's meant to wake you to awareness. Right now, we're watching Daniel's 7 keys turn simultaneously. A covenant with many nations, international oversight with a specific end date, technology enabling global control, temple preparations accelerating, false peace language, a prince-like figure brokering agreements, and the abomination warning looming ahead. We need to be clear about something important. Different Christians hold different views about the timing of these events. Some believe the church will be raptured before the tribulation begins. Others believe Christians will go through part or all of it. Theologians have debated this for centuries, and we should approach these discussions with humility. But regardless of your eschatological position, one thing is certain. Jesus told us to watch, to be aware, to recognize the signs, not so we would live in fear, but so we would live with purpose, with discernment, with readiness.